When did you realize you were the villain in someone else's story? I am a recovered alcoholic. I guess the light got switched on for me when she told me she wanted to split up and she gave me 3 days to get out of the house. So, naturally, I read her email to find out more. She told one of her friends, "The nightmare is finally over. You do a lot of self-deluding when you're an alkie. I thought we were desperately in love." That email was the ultimate wake-up call. "You're the one who killed my husband." The widow of a recently deceased farmer said that to me when I called for him on the phone. I sold agricultural chemicals at the time, and she was referring to the weed killer he bought and used for years. It had recently been discovered that the active ingredient, 2,4-D, is carcinogenic. My customer had died of cancer, and she might not have been completely wrong. But it wasn't like I knew it was dangerous in that way. None of us did. Understandable she was upset, but if 2,4-D is what caused his cancer, then he wasn't following the label and allowing himself undue exposure. Gloves and respirators aren't for fun. They protect you. 2,4-D isn't even on the nasty end of the chemicals out there, especially back in the day. I took a cat's kittens away from her when they were 4 or 5 weeks old because she couldn't take care of them anymore due to not producing enough milk. They were also in a very terrible unclean environment, so one's eyes started closing up. I couldn't take her with the kittens because she's an outside shop kitty, where I was bringing them into my home to clean them up. Deflea them. I took around 50 off the first time and 30 off the second day, and give them the food they needed. Now they are looking healthy, and being rambunctious kittens that they should be. Anyways, after I took them away, she'd meow for her kittens trying to find them, and it made me think that's like how humans with missing children feel, so I felt horrible about do it even if it was for a good cause. Update. So, this received a lot more attention than I thought it would, but here's the thing. I already have 2 7-plus-old cats, so even taking in the kittens is not something I took lightly. Usually there was a co-worker that took care of the shop feral cats, but he left this year, so other than a co-worker that truly cannot afford to help them, and what my boss provides for them, but it wasn't enough for the kittens. Also got attached to the white fluff ball. Yes, I gave them a Dawn dish soap bath to help with the fleas, but even with the flea comb, which I suggest owning one, there were a lot of fleas. They'll be around 8 weeks old come beginning of January, so I plan to find good homes for them. Second update, just for those curious. I have now found homes for all 3 of the kitties, and my boss has fixed the mother, so no more kittens from her. You a cat CPS. English wasn't my first language, and I misunderstood the writing assignment from my 6th grade teacher. I don't remember what the prompt was, but I ended up writing a piece about a fellow classmates that no one liked. Sadly, the teacher decided that I should read mine to the class in order to practice speaking and correct any mispronunciation. I ended up insulting the kid in front of the whole class for what felt like a good minute before the teacher realized what was going on and stopped me. I realized after the fact that I was the butthole in that story, but never had the guts to apologize. He ended up moving the following year due to bullies and family issues. Although this was the only incident between him and I, he probably viewed me as the French douchebag that publicly insulted him. Side note, I had barely been in the States for more than a year before this incident. However, that still doesn't excuse me from how I behaved. I wish him the best, and hopefully he ended up living a better life after he moved. I was clothes shopping in Uniqlo with my girlfriend. We both had our hands on a sweater, checking the size, when I suddenly felt that familiar burn tingle irritation in my nose. The nature of what we were doing had me standing very close to and facing my girlfriend. Since the urge was so sudden and I had my hands tied up, I instinctively turned my head and lifted my arm so as to not sneeze directly into her face. I move out of the way and don't shoot my snot and saliva onto her. Success. I'm an everyday hero. Or not. Uniqlo arranges their shelves of clothing into aisles, and they're not particularly big, just wide enough for 2 people. Unbeknownst to me, a woman had attempted to squeeze by in the narrow space my girlfriend and I did not occupy. She was mid-step and directly beside me when I turned my head to direct the sneeze away. She had her mouth slightly ajar, perhaps in preparation for an excuse me, which was unfortunate as I then sneezed directly into her open mouth and face. I froze, feeling unbelievably bad for having just shared my bodily fluid with an unsuspecting and certainly unwilling stranger. She let out one of those short quick exhales and slammed her hands over her mouth in shock and disbelief. An avalanche of apologies fell out of my mouth, but they were too late as she understandably ran off around the bend of the aisle and disappeared into a crowd of shoppers. TLDR. Had one of those almost immediate onset sneezes, avoided sneezing in GF's face and instead directed it into a stranger's open mouth and face. Oh my god, no. I'm sorry this happened to you, but I laughed. I was at a party in my teens and a group of guys were looking to beat the crap out of a guy because he apparently touched one of their girlfriend's butt. Turned out I knew the butt, the groper, not the offended posterior. Let's call him John. I ended up standing in the way despite the fact that me and John essentially hated each other. I was a smoke pit skid and he was a bit of a preppy type. To these guys I was defending some pervert, but they weren't aware that he was likely as blackout and belligerent drunk as he was because his mum died 2 days prior. I dragged him down the street to the bus stop and sent his butt home. Got attitude from the group of guys for the rest of the night and then had John wanting to fight me the next day for embarrassing him by dragging him out of the party. Come on dude. I know you were hammered, but didn't you notice the 4 guys that wanted to take you out back and boot frick you in the alley? The right thing to do would have been to pull out the phone and yell world star. My first semester teaching at a university, many students would sit in class, not ask questions, wouldn't contact me, and ignored my requesting they do so or come to office hours. Those same students failed my class. I am sure they just saw me as an enemy. A student failed my class, then asked me to write her a recommendation letter. I told her I'll do it if she insists, but it wouldn't be very convincing. Later I found out she called me an butthole on social media. It's going on right now, I think. I write software for a living. I have a co-worker who's been assigned to work on the part of software that I'm responsible for, and, well, he's terrible at his job. He's slow to deliver the changes we need, they're never tested adequately, and are almost always riddled with bugs. He's an experienced guy, several years older than I am, and longer in the industry, and the changes I've asked him for should in no way be beyond his skill level. I have a junior guy who's less than a year out of college also doing some work on my portion of the software, and he's far more reliable. The whole situation is not helping my natural tendency to resist delegating work to others. I'm frustrated with the situation, as is our boss, and I'm sure this co-worker is as well. But I'm sure from his perspective, I'm pushy, arrogant, and asking too much from him, and not understanding of his excuses. If when he's put on an improvement plan on the path to getting fired, I'm sure I'll be the villain in his eyes, or at least the second villain behind our boss, who, again, hasn't asked him to do anything beyond what someone of his experience level should be able to do. I was at a house party with some young guys and a couple girls. A girl got really drunk and passed out. I saw some guys circling her and being generally creepy. Everyone was getting ready to pass out and I was pretty sure something awful would go down if she was left there. My reaction was to move her to her friend's room to sleep it off with her friend away from the group. I woke her up and walked her to the room where her friend welcomed her to share the bed. After I left the room, I was confronted by a different girl claiming it was an attempted rape. I couldn't talk my way out of it. I got an Uber out of there, but I still think about what I should have done differently in that situation. I was the enemy in that moment and I couldn't figure out how to defend myself. I think now that it is never a good idea to be in that situation. It's no win. Sounds like you potentially saved her from actually getting raped. The girl just misunderstood your intentions. I wasn't there and only have this story to go off of, but seems like you did the right thing and shouldn't have to worry about what you could have done differently. Probably in DayZ when I set up some bait and sniped new players right off the beach for almost an entire half day in Chino. Got a lot of beans though before someone got up behind me and axed me. Me and a mate were set up on one of the hills overlooking Electro and wiped the server owners as they moved through the field of hay bales. We're pretty sure the owners teleported to our camp and stole our as 50 after. I didn't really care. We got what we wanted. Throughout middle and high school I had a back and forth relationship with a guy. We were the couple that everyone talked about. Our junior year of high school, he started dating a girl I was friends with. That friend decided she could no longer be friends with me and wanted me to stay away from her boyfriend. At the time I thought she was ridiculous and naive. She was, but I realized over time that from her point of view, she was afraid that my history with him would overcome his feelings for her. Eventually she ended up pregnant and I ended up free of him. In the end, I wonder if she feels that I'm the villain for that, too. The time I cut someone off in traffic and almost caused an accident. I had recently switched out of that lane and I didn't think anyone had filled that spot yet. I thought I had been watching my rear view enough to know no one was there. I only realized someone was there when I heard the honking. I've been more careful to actually turn my head and look since. I just imagine he was cussing me out afterwards. I'm really sorry, dude in the other car. High school. I wrote one of my closest, and I only ever had a few, friends a hateful letter. She's a quiet, unassuming person with genuine passion for things that I never learned to appreciate. I no longer remember what I wrote, but I still remember what I actually felt. Insecurity, jealousy. I was jealous of seeing her being herself. I believe the letter was intended for me to be open to her, to point out things she should really never be doing, but she never did anything wrong. She just didn't care about being judged, and that's what I'm most jealous of, being unburdened by other people's opinion. When I got mental health treatment and realized that no, my ex wasn't a terrible abusive person. She was reacting to the toxic way I treated her without realizing it. I apologized when I saw her a few years later, and she accepted it. I went back home to visit and my uncle informed me that a lady I'd briefly dated had written a short story about me in her first book. Apparently I was in butthole for breaking up with her after her ex-boyfriend threatened to beat the frick out of me a couple times. Sorry lady, I don't play that lets you and him fight for my honor game. When my stepmother told me that I belong in my dad's past and that's where I should stay so he could move on with his life. And that's when I realized that I was a villain and she was my evil step monster, and my dad wasn't going to do anything about it. Haven't spoken to either of them in 8 years, but I found out from a friend that they had a baby girl last year. God, that's fricked up. When I was a sophomore in high school I had a crush on this stupidly good looking guy who sat near me in my math class. There was also this one gothic guy in that class that wore lots of chains, tassels, gothic clothing, and he was very quiet or social. One day, stupidly good looking guy, we will call him Jay, decided to play a prank on the gothic guy, we will call him Jack. While everyone was working in groups, Jay went over to Jack, behind him, while he was sitting in his desk. Jay carefully took some of the tassels chains that were near the bottoms of Jack's pants and lifted up a nearby desk so that his chains tassels were stuck on the desk's legs. I remember trying to hold in laughter and giggling, as of course Jay was doing this just to be a peacock. But I had this huge crush on him, so I just went with it because I wanted him to like me. In about a minute after, of course, Jack gets up to sharpen a pencil or something and completely biffs it and falls flat with a loud thud. He ended up having to go to the nurse because his nose was so bloody. I was so into Jay that I laughed with him and his friends about it. To this day, this is my biggest regret and something that I wish I had a time machine for. I've since tried to find him, looked through the yearbook, tried to find him on Facebook, etc. But I've had no luck. Jack, if you're reading this, I cannot tell you how sorry I am that I didn't stop him. That I laughed, even though I knew dang well that is a crappy thing to do to someone. I was a stupid girl with a stupid crush. That didn't even pan out BTW, and I'd love to buy you a nice dinner, and to tell you that I actually loved your style. Sorry I was such a villain Dumby. I really admire your sincere regret and apology. I know you must be a really good person to still think about this sometimes and feel bad over it still. I used to be mean to this kid when I was in 5th grade who everyone thought was weird. About halfway through the year I realized that I was kind of a villain to him, and I felt so bad I became his friend. We ended up becoming really good friends and still are even to this day. That was really nice from you to realize and help him after you're the good guy. I dated someone, but was still hung up on someone else. I had to break up with this girl after a few months of dating because there's another woman. I think she assumed I had cheated on her, which I didn't. But, which is worse, guy cheated on me or guy had feelings for another woman the entire time we dated. I think I'm probably the villain in either case. My ex-husband probably considers me the villain because I put my foot down and made him take responsibility for his actions, which included him having to move back in with his parents so that he could pay his half of the bills and expenses we split when we separated. I gave him all the chances in the world and even told him I would front him several months' payments so he could find a place to live, but he had to have a job by X date. Friend even guaranteed him a job but he skipped the interview. I've heard his versions of the story, and I'm the B. When I watch movies now, and I see the pompous douchebag butthole bully bad guy doing pointless cruel crap like shoulder shoving someone or knocking books out of someone's hands, I realize I was that guy, and I was big, and had lots of friends who weren't very nice either, and I realized I probably legitimately scared and terrorized some people when I thought we were just joking around. It's admirable that you've realized it. I moved to a new area, knew a few folks, and met some of their friends. One of them happened to be this one girl. Wasn't interested in dating her. Let's start with that. But she was nice, friendly, etc. One day, she tells me she's going to the movies with a friend. I said I'd like to go as well, and asked her to buy my ticket, and I'd pay her back. Anyways, we had a good time, enjoyed the movie, and then as it ended, this girl says she has to run to the restroom, and that's when her friend strikes. She just goes off on me about how all men are dogs. How dare you play with her and spend any time with her? If you want to date her, then be a man and just ask her. There's something about me that just cannot stand having my character questioned. I wasn't trying anything more than being friendly, but this ridiculous moron was insulting me, so I said, fine, I'll ask her out then, just so she'd shoot up. And when I turned around, this girl was standing there with doe eyes. She immediately said she'd love to go on a date, and I was stuck. I wasn't interested in her. I just wanted her stupid friend to be quiet, but I couldn't say I wasn't interested now. Her friend would only have more reason to believe all men were evil. Long story short, I ended up dating her for a couple of months, the whole time just trying to let her down easy. After 2 months, I was able to sit her down and just say I wasn't interested in dating her anymore. She took it better than I expected, but she was still hurt. We didn't see each other for a long time after that. She's married now, so all's well that ends well I suppose, but I still feel bad. I know I'd hate to find out I'd been treated like that. I knew a couple of people that would do this as a trick to force people to date their unlikable friend. Transferred to an office where the local IT guy had been goofing off behind a locked door for years. Proceed to do the job I came to do, and got promoted to a spot over him. He was already resentful before I got there, and massively more so when he did not slide into the slot I vacated, and he was in no way qualified for. He was real good at that pipe game on Windows 3 though. Eventually he transferred out to a position where I heard they made him actually work. After he left, people told me how much he'd badmouthed me. I'll call him Doug. A story. We were deploying the first PCS in the office and our HR reps got a couple. On one of them, the secretary asked if he could install the mouse. Our applications were DOS based, so it was not required though the machines had Windows on them which you had to start by typing Win at the command prompt. This woman wanted to play solitaire. He said no, but stuck the mouse in her desk drawer. A day later I went by to check and maybe install something. She asked about the mouse. I plugged it in, and he wondered why he never got promoted. Be nice to HR. People. I love that you gave him a fake name to tell the story, and then never used that name in it. When I said I'm worried I might end up with a B in the accounting tutor room, I think some of my classmates were trying to set me on fire with their mind. Oh man, I know I haven't been in school a long time now. I thought you meant B as in B. Years ago there was a stray cat that terrorized my dog. I'd let her outside, and this big black hulking sucker would make a beeline for her every dang time. He'd hide in various parts of the yard, and come racing to fight her when she came out. And she was a big dog, too. When we'd come running out to shoo him away, he'd yowl and hiss at us aggressively before darting off. After he actually got some scratches on the dog, we called the SPCA on him. Animal control came out, nabbed him, and basically implied to us that his aggression wasn't going to earn him a lot of brownie points in the pen. Flash forward a month or so, and there's a crap load of missing posters around the neighborhood for Booba, a big ugly black cat. Apparently the sucker wasn't a stray after all, he lived on the street behind us, and now his owners wanted him back. Granted, they were twats who let their dominant male cat roam free and gave him a crappy name, but we did kind of sign their cat a death sentence. My husband called the number to let them know what happened, and the lady started screaming at him about what awful people we are for not asking them before calling animal control. Granted, we really did not believe this demon belonged to anybody, but yeah, I guess we're the villains there. In high school, well, more like middle, high, in 5th grade all my friends had transferred out for one reason or another, and I was a big wallflower and ended up being picked on. Since I was the weakest link out of a grade of barely 30, the new girl transfers in 6th. Counselor sets me up to be her buddy to show her around, and we end up being thick as thieves. Big first oh god was probably that in her first week, she deadpan told our fellow students she was the daughter of Satan and that she had dreams of Satan coming and talking to her. Living in Alabama, and myself growing up religiously eclectic, I had to play some hard damage control and told her to cut the crap, but she was serious. Year-olds, we end up adopting a straggler or two into our outcast group. Things are going groovy. 7th, when our middle school starts, hits, gain a couple more, etc etc. By 8th, I was absolutely beyond done with her. She had horrible sleep paralysis that she was convinced were actual demons coming to contact her and tell her when the world was going to end, and she began getting into witchcraft, likely inspired by all the video games she played. But she enjoyed being able to curse other classmates more than anything. She and her family are actually Mormon. She also, on a week school trip to New Orleans, told her hotel roommates that there was a demon horse that watched over them in their sleep, and pretended to stand there and pet the air and feed the horse invisible apples. She would also stare at the girls half naked after they showered. Ended up scaring the crap out of one of the younger girls. By late 8th, she had invited herself to sleepovers to proceed to creep everyone, and I had a nightmare about her killing me. That's when I decided I needed out, so I just stopped talking to her, and I knew it hurt her. But ultimately, it was either my sanity or hers, and hers was clearly long since compromised. She would write ugly poems about killing the evil people around her and read them aloud in English, became increasingly withdrawn as other members of our friend group followed our lead, and eventually, thankfully, transferred out. Last I heard, it seems like she's found God again or something, but at least she seems to feel better, and I'm genuinely happy that she's happy. But in the end, I'll always have to live with being the one who betrayed her and put her in that dark place during our youth. I think you were right to be worried. This kind of stuff you can have difficulty figuring out if they are messing with you or if there might be something wrong with them mentally. Just now when I sucker elbowed my way through a family that was huddled over a map, because they were right in front of the subway door that was about to shut. I'm sorry, I'm probably that rude girl from the city on your vacation, but please move. Sometimes people say excuse me and it works. I think the moment I realized I was fighting a plucky band of teenage misfits and really took stock in how much mustache twirling I was doing. I used to teach special ed and had a lot of kids with behavioral issues. One afternoon one of my kindergartners wanted to play on the computer instead of getting on the bus to go home. I turned off the computer, so he picked up my phone and called the police on me. I had unplugged the phone, but he thought it was still working, so he went on this big phone rant about what a mean teacher I was and how the police needed to come arrest me right away. It was pretty funny. As a person who actually helps enforce rules at the school I work at, I am sure I am a villain to many a teenager, especially the one who is currently suspended and might get expelled for smoking in the elevator. Pretty much anytime I have any contact with my mother-in-law, apparently my life's mission is to maliciously hurt her feelers in any way I can conceive of. Are just normal. After I told the guy in front of me at a ghost story to put away his dang phone, he shouted back he would as soon as I stopped shaking my popcorn bag like a maracas. In my defense, shaking the bag distributed the salt, but I ceased and desisted so he could hear Unimara eat that dang pie. Wild thought, you both the villains for everyone else. My first year of college I was severely depressed and manic. I was seeing a guy at the time who would make offhand comments about my appearance that made me even more insecure than I already was, but my reactions were completely over the top and I would cry for hours and threaten self-harm. When he broke up with me, I freaked out and threatened to kill myself, to the point where the police came to my door because the neighbors had requested them to do a welfare check. It wasn't until a few years later, when I had started going to therapy and taking antidepressants and seeing someone else, that I had the exact same thing happen to me. Suddenly someone was threatening to kill themselves if I didn't answer their calls and asking if I wanted to be responsible for that. I later called the first ex and apologized for my behavior. I was so locked in my own depression that I failed to see how I was unfairly holding him emotionally hostage. I was so busy playing the victim in my own head, I hadn't realized I was the villain in their story. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.